Happy Sunday. Almost skipped to Monday, but it's still Sunday. Nice to see you guys. Let's find a comfy seat. Something where you have the opportunity to just settle into a nice, fluid, easy breath. And then allow that to be your experience. Maybe the eyes close here. However, you settle physically, allow for a continual deeper expression of ease. Each cycle of breath, promoting more and more of that experience of ease. Really being responsive to that idea of deeper ease with each cycle of breath, tweaking and adjusting so that that continues to be true. And we'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. Last 20 seconds, finding your way into the most stable, most easy shape you can create at this moment. Eventually, there'll be a time when it feels appropriate to let the eyes open if they're closed. We'll turn our palms down and pressurize into our left hand as we turn the gaze towards the right. Try to keep that right shoulder relatively stable as you do so. So, this is just a cervical spine rotation. And then we'll come back to neutral and we'll do the same thing. Pressurize that right hand and we'll gaze towards the left. Left shoulder stays stable to relatively stable as we do so. And we'll come back to neutral. And now we're going to be more torso involved. So left hand presses down. We'll turn towards the right. Try to draw that right shoulder back as you do so. Maybe even accessing or enabling the ability to gaze behind you. And we'll return back to neutral. And then right hand presses and we gaze back over that left shoulder. Rotate that left shoulder. Think about the entirety of the torso rotating with the cervical spine. And when you feel neutral, we'll find our way back into neutral. And let's just add a little lateral sway here. Palms can be anchored, palms can be up, whatever feels best and most appropriate. Just thinking about an anchored hip girdle and some torso lateral sway. waking up intercostal musculature. And then maybe even depending on how the back feels, how the spine is integrated, maybe even feeling some little dysfunction along the spinal column and where you might want to create more space. Eventually, we'll find our way back to neutral just when you feel appropriate. Let's take ourselves into a brief little forward fold. Just from where we are in our seat, you can be kickstand here, you can be on your forehead, your forearms, you can be on your forehead. Any of those shapes that gives your body the ability to expand. And we'll just give ourselves 20 more seconds here. Just a little forward fold expansiveness. And when it feels appropriate, into a seat. Nice work. Let's do this. Let's take a prop, one of our blankets or towels, just folded into a block-like shape. So I went hot dog and then hamburger. And but any block-like shape that works for you works. And we'll just set that next to us. Have your other blanket or towel accessible, and we're going to head right onto our backs. Settling in here, usually there's this big, long, especially in balance practices, right? There's this big, long standing sequence, and then we get on our back and we feel all the stuff we've done. Here, we've spent 5 minutes ish, just kind of beginning to open up the torso space. See if you can already feel the impact you've made. And then when you're ready, we'll just slide our block like prop underneath our tailbone for a little supported bridge. Looking to warm up the spine. Warm up may be the wrong word, but prepare the spine for some deeper rotations today. So as you settle here, really think about the top of the lumbar, how it's gaining access to this gentle flexion from the low back bend from the supported seat. And then as you're breathing, think about how the spine, the top of the lumbar where we're joining the thoracic spine, so kind of that lumbar into the rib cage space, how that is articulating through its flexion and extension as you're breathing. A lot of times we'll get into these elevated hip shapes. And we only think about the flexion side of the articulation because it's the most pronounced. But as you inhale in, you get that natural arch and extension into the lumbar. Can you feel both sides of the breath articulation? And can you really use the articulation of your spine by your breath to settle more deeply into the shape? Become more at ease here. And through the ease, more expansive. Really try to stay with the sensory experience of the spinal articulation through each cycle of breath. And if you fall away from that experience, if you can draw yourself back. There's this little waterway. It runs by the side of this village. A long time ago, it had a different name, I'm sure. But today, it's only known as Filth Creek. You've probably guessed, but it didn't get its name of Filth Creek because of its beauty. It got its name because at some point, some time ago, villagers started throwing their trash into the creek. And over the course of time, Filth Creek became less and less of a creek and more of a pile of rubbish. If you've lost that awareness of the articulation of your spine through each cycle of breath, and if you have, draw yourself back. And we are going to draw our awareness to the spine and think about getting into the neutral point of the articulation. And so we're not rounding into the lumbar and we're not extending into the lumbar, but we're truly neutral. Lock that in. The musculature engagement is almost certainly going to be required. A little bit of core engagement, but try to use the bare minimum. And then we're going to elevate our knees. So elevate the feet maybe. The knees are going to have the ability to rotate. And we're going to start some little gentle circles with the knees here. Nothing that is overtaxing of the musculature, but you may feel the abdominals a little bit more than we might want to in a recharge class. Really worth kind of articulating the musculature on either side of the spinal column, which is why we're doing this. engaging and re-engaging. We'll eventually come to a neutral point, and then we'll reverse the direction of our knees. Again, this isn't a long thing. We're not trying to fatigue our musculature. We're just trying to activate some of that quadriceps lumborum, those big straps of musculature along the spinal column, so that they'll be a little bit more receptive to our twists. There will come a point where you feel like you've had enough, or you feel like you're balanced, and we can release the feet back down to the mat. Elevate the hips enough to slide our prop out from underneath us. We can set that to the side for the moment, and then release our tailbone down to the mat. And as the tailbone comes down to the mat, pay attention to how the spine feels here. Once again, an opportunity to kind of check in on what we've done. Where have the sensations changed? Have the sensations changed? What's speaking the loudest or the clearest? And then let's allow the bottoms of the feet to come together and the knees to fall out wide. And so, I'm talking about twists, or I'm talking about preparing for twists, and we're so focused on this medial line. And so the question is why? Why would the medial line be impactful in the twists? And remembering that our body stress response is to clamp down the medial line because it's the area of the body that has the most ability to articulate and move. And it is also the home to the central nervous system, centrally located, conveniently enough. And so when our body's stressed, it clamps down, the psoas pulls, the entirety of the spinal vertebrae get compressed together by that musculature tightening. And we're more protective of our nervous system, but we're less available for rotation. And so we're addressing that medial line first. And we'll give ourselves just about 20 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees to neutral. And exhale the knees over to the left side. We're going to pause here for a little moment, feeling how the body is responding to this rotational ask. Thinking about how you can use your breath to calm the nervous system, to allow more ease in the rotation. Kind of keeping that as our first thought when we run into restriction. Body clamps up. Can we relax and find more space, or find access to more space that's there? And we'll inhale our knees back to neutral. And then exhale the knees over to the second side. Feeling into the rotation, any restriction, and then if we find our way to some level of restriction, relaxing. To give ourselves more ease. Eventually, there's going to come a time, no rush to make it true, when you feel balanced. And when you do, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Think about reintegrating the spine and then keeping your right kneecap pointed towards the ceiling or sky. Let's drop the left knee out. So a little half butterfly. And then we're going to inhale that knee back to neutral, and we'll exhale the second side out. Right knee falls out, left knee points up. And we'll inhale to neutral. And then we'll just reverse. Right knee stays, left knee falls. And now you're going to start to sync these movements with your breath. Exhales allow you to open one side or the other. The inhales bring you back to this neutral center spot. As you're going through these repetitions, can you continue to elongate the duration of your breath so that the legs are open longer, and so that it takes longer to bring your knees back to neutral? So think about the continual expansion of the duration of your breath. A long time, leadership in this little village openly encourages the idea of throwing refuse into Filth Creek. Better in the creek than in the village becomes the motto. One year, and no one's really sure when she arrived. One year, a strange little outsider moves into the village. Her clothes are tattered. She's almost always filthy. And she starts to become known as the woman of Filth Creek because she spends her days in this pile of garbage. And she's separating out these huge piles of rubbish, pulling out little bits of metal and wire, stacking them in a pile, and little strips of cloth, and she's stacking them into these piles. She continues broken pottery separated into these piles. She continues to separate these piles of garbage. And the piles of garbage continue to get larger and larger. Do 2 more times on each side here. The breath is slow so that your body can expand and receive. Eventually, with no rush to make this true, eventually your body comes back to neutral. Both kneecaps point towards the ceiling. And we will take our left ankle across our right thigh. Thinking about the two halves of the body now. The upper half, the torso up, and the lower half, the hips down. Anchor the torso half of your body and exhale so that the top of the left thigh can come down towards the floor mat. And then we'll inhale that back to neutral. And we're going to work through these dynamic rotations. Exhales into the rotation, left thigh comes down towards the floor, may or may not reach. Inhales back to this landed, settled neutral. Now let's just work through this with ease here. Remember that we want the duration to be as long as our body can comfortably breathe through, so that we are fully at ease. And fully capable of our fullest rotation. I love these figure 4 twists. They're really nice in isolating the upper and lower half of the body. So remember that the upper half of the body is the anchor here, that right shoulder in particular. Let's do 2 more. And then we are going to reverse this so that the bottom of the left foot can come down to the right side of the mat. And we're going to pause here. A little static hold. The tibia and fibia on the left side are roughly vertical, so you're energizing that left knee slightly up. That does bring in some of this quad musculature. And so that may feel like, see if I can make that a little easier to see. So the bottom of the left foot goes to the right side. It's reversing the twist that we've been working on dynamically to the opposite side for the static hold. I like this twist, again, out of that figure 4 shape, because of the way it brings this lower lateral chain musculature in on the twist. It's very infrequent that the lateral chain gets involved, especially the lower lateral chain on a twist, right? So the more you energize into that left knee, the more we pull into this lateral quad musculature and into the femoral head attachment. And we just find our way to ease here. Ease may feel like a tricky word if you're feeling a lot of that lateral chain pull. Like I said, not a piece of musculature that we access very often, especially in twists. Generally, because we're twisting kind of with everything in one direction, the lateral chain is very much at ease. See if you can use that breath nervous system connection that we've been developing to relax any sensory information we're receiving. And we'll just be at ease here. As this woman pulls trash from Filth Creek. She's fairly frequently ridiculed by the members of the community. The name Filth Creek Woman isn't exactly a compliment. But she quietly goes about her business. One day, some of the younger kids of the community come out. They don't know much about her. And so they ask what she's doing. She says she's pulling the trash from the creek. And a few of the younger kids start to help her. And the piles of separated trash grow exponentially. We'll give ourselves just another 60 seconds here. This second half of the first side. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Let that left foot come back down to the mat. And now we likely have some pretty good asymmetry. Let's add a little lateral sway. This does not need to be full rotation. In fact, I probably encourage it not to be full rotation. We're not looking to twist here. We're looking to reintegrate. Finding our way back towards neutral. Eventually, we'll get to the point where we can feel the sacrum relatively at ease against our mat. We'll work to the second side. Our right ankle comes across the left thigh. You get that figure four space, and then we're looking to take the top of the right thigh to the right side. This is a dynamic movement with our breath. So we're exhaling down and inhaling back to neutral. Exhaling slowly and fluidly and deeply, and inhaling back to neutral. And let's just carry this forward with our breath, with as much ease and grace for the body as we can offer. Slowly, fluidly, and with ease in each cycle. Yeah. Really allowing the body to experience any sensations. Let it arise. Eventually, with the help of these younger members of the community, enough trash is removed from Filth Creek that the water can be seen once again. It starts out as just a trickle. More trash that's removed, or Filth Creek looks like a creek once again. Maybe one more dynamic cycle here. And then we will re-find that stable, neutral figure four before we allow the bottom of the right foot to come down onto the left side. And now remembering that the more energy we put on the lateral edge to press or engage that verticalness of the tibia and fibia, the more we'll feel that lateral pull. Really give yourself that opportunity to settle in to the static shape with ease. One of these sides
as is almost always true, will have more sensation than the other. So we may be settling into a side of relative ease, or we may be settling into a side of relative rigidity. If the latter is true, we need to spend more effort on relaxing the nervous system, on being more at ease in the space we've settled into. And so, day after day, the woman of Filth Creek and the younger members of the community remove more and more of the trash until eventually Filth Creek is just a creek again. Water flowing, and even more interestingly, the members of the community have stopped tossing their garbage in. And they are separating them into these giant piles. Without much explanation at all, these piles are starting to get smaller. A woman of Filth Creek has disappeared from the community, and yet her work has seemingly made a lasting impact. Connecting your breath with your nervous system to settle more deeply. We have about 60 more seconds here on this second side. A rate of respiration, unwinding tension in the body. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral and let the feet come back down to the mat. Allow for that little bit of movement to explore reintegration of the spine. And then when you feel neutrally integrated, we'll bring the bottoms of the feet together and let the knees fall out wide one last time. Settling in to the delicateness of your breath, the gentleness of the shape you've found. When it feels appropriate for you, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Once again, think about the neutrality of the spine here against the mat in particular. And we'll bring our feet into an elevated position, knees into a space where they can once again create these circles. All we want kind of utilize the hip space we've created to allow these circles to happen. We want freedom of movement here. Eventually, we'll pause and we'll reverse the direction. The core is engaged just enough to maintain our neutrality, not trying to make our body work, just trying to make our space ours. Eventually, we'll feel balanced, release the feet, settle. And as you settle, ask yourself if there's anything your body might need, want, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, it's the time to offer that. If you have everything you need, if you're ready for some stillness, you can find your way into that shape now. But let's just be ready for our version of Shavasana. One day, the woman of Filth Creek connects with all of her young helpers. She asks them to gather their friends and their family and come out into the woods to meet at the spring that feeds Filth Creek. And you're ready when you're in the appropriate shape, just dropping into your version of Shavasana this morning.
As the villagers started to show up at this spring, we saw this towering statue shimmering under the sunlight with bits of glass reflecting this cascade of colors. And these cloth tapestries seem to share these stories weaved by the wind, held together by scraps of metal. And there was a collective gasp as through their widening eyes they saw this beauty they had never expected, born directly from their discarded waste. And start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, into our wrists, our ankles, our elbows, and our knees. Our shoulders, our hips, neck, head, jaw, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of the body moves, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes where you are in back into a seat. In the seated space, spine gets tall, breast gets fluid, eyes closed. Find your way back into the ease you've crafted. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, And you remind yourself that with effort and intention, even filth can be transformed into beauty. And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Love the heck out of you. A beautiful day. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. And if I don't see you till next week, have a beautiful week. Love you. Bye.